If you look at Amazon and what will drive the shares going forward, it's primarily revenue growth. And with Amazon being as big as it is today, for 100 basis points of incremental growth, they need to add $3 billion of revenue. So it's going to be more difficult for Amazon to continue growing revenue at an elevated rate given its size. The only other thing I would add there, acquiring PillPack and pursuing the $2 trillion global pharmacy opportunity is great, but the company's still going to need to execute. So it's interesting to see that revenue came in a little light in the quarter, and the outlook for third quarter on revenue was also a little lighter.
Yeah, Greg, where do you think investors should be focused? On that lighter revenue outlook, the slight miss on revenue, or the giant profit beat?
Well, look, I think I would agree that their revenue is going to slow. That's what happens when you get to be the size that they are, which is almost 7% of U.S. retail sales. So the key to us is how they're monetizing it in different ways. And I think what they said in the release, particularly about Alexa, was fascinating because that's ultimately how they're going to get spend per household from $2,200 last year to over $5,000. And I think that's really the next leg for Amazon. But the growth is slowing, and we expect it to slow to around 20% over the next couple of years. And so that isn't that shocking. It's just that they're really monetizing it through subscription services and advertising and everything else.
Just to flesh that out a little bit more, Greg, you're saying that essentially expanding the number of devices on which they have an Alexa connection with customers, that in itself is going to catalyze more spending. I assume that's mostly through Prime members?
Absolutely. We do a lot of consumer survey work, and earlier this year we found that 5% of Americans have used a voice-activated speaker to shop. That looks a lot like what people were doing with their mobile phones 7 years ago. Today, 85% of Americans shop with their phones regularly. If they get that to 50% of households shopping through these devices, that could add at least $1,000 of spending per household over the next 5 years. We think that's how they get bigger than Walmart on the retail side.
Tom, Kevin O'Leary was pretty concerned about increasing competition in the cloud computing AWS part of the business. What do you think about that and the growth that we saw there?
Sure. So if you looked at what's been driving the shares over the last 12 months, it's definitely their AWS cloud computing effort, because the beauty for Amazon is that the fastest growing business from a revenue standpoint is its most profitable. I do think, though, in addition to the fact that they had a multi-year lead on both Microsoft and Google and others, I think they're still in an enviable position. And historically, when you think Amazon, you think of a company with lean margins. So if you look at their story in AWS, they consistently cut prices. So yes, more competition is concerning, but I think when it comes to price leadership and continuing to cut price, I'm not so concerned in their cloud computing effort.